Heart pounding. I never imagined that a simple stroll through Central Park with my mini umbrella would turn into a terrifying ordeal. Suddenly, Karen mistakes my mini umbrella for a gun, then calls the FBI on me. Here's how it all went down. The day was shaping up to be just perfect for a leisurely stroll in Central Park. The sky was overcast, and there was a slight chill in the air, hinting at the possibility of rain. Prepared as always, I had my mini umbrella tucked away in my pocket, ready to be deployed at the first sign of a drizzle. As I made my way along the winding paths of the park, I noticed a woman walking briskly ahead of me. She seemed to be in her own world, muttering to herself and occasionally glancing around with a wild look in her eyes. I decided to keep my distance and continue enjoying my walk. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a light drizzle began to fall. I stopped and pulled out my mini umbrella, grateful for its compact size and convenience. Just as I was about to open it, I heard a sharp gasp from behind. Turning around, I saw the woman, now identified as Karen, staring at me with wide, horrified eyes. "What in the world do you think you're doing?" she screamed, her voice filled with panic and disbelief. "I'm just opening my umbrella. It's starting to rain," I explained calmly, showing her the compact device in my hand. "That's not an umbrella! That's a gun!" she shrieked, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. I was completely taken aback by her reaction. "No, really, it's just an umbrella. Look," I said, attempting to open it to prove my point, but Karen was already on her phone, dialing frantically. "I'm calling the FBI! There's a man with a gun in Central Park!" she yelled, her voice reaching an octave I didn't think was possible. My heart started to race as I realized the gravity of the situation. "Ma'am, please just look at it. It's an umbrella," I pleaded, my voice laced with desperation. "I'm not falling for that. Help! He's got a gun!" Karen screamed, attracting the attention of everyone nearby. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and police cars screeched to a halt in front of us. Officers with guns drawn approached, their faces stern and focused. "Drop the weapon," one of them commanded, his gun pointed directly at me. "It's an umbrella," I shouted, throwing the mini umbrella on the ground. The officers cautiously approached, and one of them picked up the umbrella, examining it closely. After a moment, he looked up at me, then at Karen, his expression a mix of relief and frustration. "It's just an umbrella, ma'am," he said to Karen, who was now looking even more crazed, her eyes wide and unblinking. "I know what I saw. He's lying. Check him again," she demanded, her voice filled with rage and disbelief. The officer sighed and turned to me. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. You're free to go." I nodded, my body trembling from the adrenaline. I picked up my mini umbrella and quickly left the scene, eager to put as much distance between myself and Karen as possible. Behind me, I could hear Karen arguing with the officers, her voice filled with rage and disbelief. "You're just going to let him go? I can't believe this. You're all in on it, aren't you?" As I walked away, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I was relieved that the situation was resolved without any harm, but I was also shaken by how quickly things had escalated. Karen's stubbornness and refusal to see reason had turned a simple walk in the park into a chaotic scene. I realized that some people are determined to see threats where there are none, and there's not much you can do to change their minds. The rest of my walk was spent in a state of disbelief, replaying the events over and over in my head. And as for my mini umbrella, it now serves as a reminder that even the most innocent objects can be mistaken for something sinister in the eyes of a Karen gone wild. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all, grateful that the situation didn't escalate any further. After all, it's not every day that you get accused of carrying a gun when all you have is an umbrella. Wow, that's one crazy story. Can't believe some people can mistake an umbrella for a gun. Karen really took it to the next level, calling the FBI. Glad everything ended peacefully, though. Stay safe out there, folks. It was a fateful day in late fall of 1976, and I was only 11 years old when I missed the bus to school. Little did I know that this seemingly ordinary day would turn into a heart-pounding adventure that would forever be etched in my memory. Here's how it all went down. Today, I missed the bus, and my dad said he was too busy to drive me the 20 miles to school. I stayed home, worked on my schoolwork, and did some chores around our farm. This year, we had a very wet spring, so crops were planted late. My dad was out in the field harvesting field corn. It was getting close to noon, so I went into the house and started lunch, knowing my dad would be coming in for lunch any time. By 12:30, he still hadn't come in for lunch. This man had a stomach you could set a clock by. I headed out towards the field to see why he was late. I saw him staggering towards the house as if he was drunk. I wasn't alarmed, just wondered what was going on. Why was he walking like that? He finally reached me and raised his forearms towards me. It took a few seconds to understand the blood all over his clothes and the fact that his arms no longer had hands. He had the presence of mind to have shoved both hands into the bucket of axle grease we had by the machine shed. I ran into the house, grabbed the keys, and got him into the truck. I'd been driving around the farm and back roads for a couple of years now. We set off for the nearest hospital in a 20-year-old farm truck with a 3-speed manual transmission. It was about 30 miles from where we lived. It just so happened that there was a river with a drawbridge that we had to cross to get into town. They were in the process of building a higher bridge and getting rid of the drawbridge. So, as you can imagine, they had moved the original road, narrowed the lanes, and made all the usual construction changes. I was driving about a mile away from the bridge when I encountered a traffic jam. The bridge was up to allow a barge to pass. My dad, who was in the passenger seat, was moaning and drifting in and out of consciousness. In our farm truck, I decided to veer off the road and drive through a construction area to reach the front of the line for bridge traffic. I honked and waved to get the attention of the workers, who reluctantly made way for me. However, one worker blocked my path by parking his truck in front of me and started yelling obscenities. Later, I learned that he was the foreman. I had to stop because there were Caterpillar tractors on both sides. He stormed towards my truck and swung open the door, ready to attack me. But when he saw my injured dad, he forcefully pulled me out of the driver's seat and threw me into the truck bed. He then frantically communicated through his radio. This man was multitasking, managing a dozen tasks simultaneously. His workers ran ahead of the truck towards the line of cars. He urgently spoke into his radio, demanding the bridge operator to immediately halt the barge and lower the bridge. All of this took him only a minute or two, but for me, it felt like a mere moment. He drove the truck up to the bridge, and then came the original Karen. This lady is forever etched in my memory. She was driving a Cadillac with a towering bleach beehive hairdo, a cigarette in her hand, and the most unpleasant expression on her face. The construction workers had been pleading with her to back up and make way for the truck to cross the bridge. They explained that there was an injured man in the truck. This bleached cow shouted that she didn't care and that the injured man could wait. She insisted on reaching her beauty appointment. The foreman warned her that if she didn't move willingly, he would use a Caterpillar to move her car. She arrogantly replied with, "Do you know who my husband is?" At that moment, our truck was barely 2 inches away from the side of her car. My dad raised his hands. Upon seeing the blood, grease, and the fact that his hands were missing, she fainted. The foreman and his workers put her car in neutral and pushed it into a ditch. The foreman then drove us to the hospital while continuing his conversation through the radio. He requested that the police be present to arrest her and have her car towed for endangering someone's life. I don't know the details of what happened to her afterward, but I do know that the foreman was an unstoppable force. So, that's my story of dealing with the original Karen who sparked all the current Karens. Since some may wonder, my dad's sleeve got caught in the gears of the corn picker while he was working on it without turning it off. When his right hand got caught, he tried to free it with his left hand. This resulted in several months spent in the hospital and multiple surgeries. In the end, he lost his right hand completely and lost all fingers on his left hand except for his thumb. Despite this, he lived another 30 years. Karen deserved what happened to her, but it's a relief that your dad lived a long and fulfilling life despite the challenges he faced. I never expected my first year as a doctor to be filled with such tension and danger. From the moment I stepped into the government facility, where I worked alongside the notorious Dr. Phil, I knew trouble was brewing. Little did I know that his reckless actions, combined with his deep-rooted resentment, would lead to a shocking confrontation that could jeopardize everything. Here's how it all went down. I recently wrapped up my medical studies and found myself in the thick of my social service year, a mandatory stint of unsupervised medical work we've got to pull off before getting our official titles here. I landed a gig at a government facility, doling out free consultations alongside other services like physiotherapy, nutritional advice, dental care, and family medicine. The place was a bit of a madhouse, with 2 doctors' offices to manage the chaos. My instructions were clear. Only see patients with a medical file from this institution. The other doc, an older guy we'll call Phil, was on deck for the patients flying solo without a file. Phil's been around the block, working under a government worker contract, while I was the new kid with a social service contract. He had the kind of pull that could make my life difficult if he wanted to, and that's not even mentioning the surprise inspections from the Secretariat of Health we had to be ready for. My game plan? Keep my head down, steer clear of complaints, and make sure my paperwork was spotless. At first, I had to run my cases by Phil to get the lay of the land, but we didn't exactly hit it off. He was stuck in his ways and had a bit of an ego, and I wasn't about to bend my practices to suit his. Like, he wanted me to sign off on antibiotics for viral throat infections, which I just couldn't do. He called it insubordination. I called it doing my job right. Eventually, I got my own space, and the patients with files knew to come straight to me, though some still went to Phil. But here's the thing. When a patient has a file, we've got rules to follow. Signed informed consent, notes for every visit signed by the patients, lab results, the whole 9 yards. Phil wasn't supposed to see the patients with files, so he never bothered with notes or any of that. A lot of his patients were one and done, so why bother, right? But then, other docs and nurses started poking around my files, asking about specific patients. Turns out, Phil was seeing patients with files, second-guessing my treatments, and then reporting me for it. Luckily, my paperwork was on point, and I could prove I was on the up and up. Phil, though, he was in deep. He didn't write a single note, and he was even bragging about seeing patients with files without checking their records or writing anything down. He ended up in hot water, but he just couldn't let it go and kept reporting me every couple of weeks. Finally, the regional boss had to step in and tell him he couldn't see patients with files unless I was supervising. Then, one day, Phil really crossed a line. Keeping records for adult patients is one thing, but for kids, it's a whole different ballgame. If a parent accuses a doc of acting out of line and there's no record of the visit, the doc's in trouble. I had this 8-year-old patient, Louis, on the autism spectrum. He'd lost a kidney to a congenital condition, and the other one wasn't in great shape. Medications had to be just right or they could build up in his system. Turns out Phil had seen Louis for an infection about 10 days before, but he didn't tell me, didn't write anything down, didn't get consent, and didn't even check the kid's file. And since he worked shorter hours than me, there was no way he could have gotten to the file without me noticing. I had to talk to him about it, keep things calm, but make it clear he was playing with fire. But Phil, he didn't take my calm approach well at all. In the middle of a consultation, he burst through the door, red-faced and fuming. "How dare you question my methods? I've been in this field while you were still in diapers," he shouted, not caring that I had a patient and her young son in the room with me. I was absolutely livid, but I knew I had to keep my cool. "Phil, this is neither the time nor the place. I have a patient right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I think this is the perfect time," he retorted, glaring at me. "You need to learn some respect for the senior doctors in this institution." I took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of my patient, her son, and the nurse in the room all on us. "Phil, you were explicitly told by the regional chief not to see patients with files without my supervision. You ignored that, and you put a child's life at risk. That's what this is about. Not respect, not seniority. It's about doing our jobs right and keeping our patients safe." The room was tense, and I could see the shock on the faces of my patient and her son. The nurse stood there, her eyes wide, but she gave me a subtle nod, letting me know she was on my side. Phil looked like he was about to explode, but then he just scoffed and stormed out of the room, leaving us all in stunned silence. The mother, still wide-eyed, turned to me and said, "Doctor, if you need me to tell anyone about what just happened, I will. That was completely out of line." I gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry you had to witness this." The nurse chimed in. "Yeah, that was something, but you handled it well." I nodded, still trying to shake off the adrenaline. "Let's get back to our consultation. I apologize for the interruption." Phil tried to turn the tables, reporting me for my conduct. But with no notes and a pediatric patient with a chronic condition involved, it didn't look good for him. Word got around, and thanks to my nurse witness, it wasn't just idle gossip. I'd love to say Phil got what was coming to him, but he managed to keep his job, though he's not the big shot he used to be. As for me, I'm just glad to be done with my social service and done with Phil. Seniors in the workplace should learn that respect is something they should earn, not demand, just because they've been there for a long time. Being in a position for a while doesn't automatically make someone right. Respect should be based on competence, professionalism, and treating others with dignity. It's about mutual respect and creating a positive work environment for everyone. As I reflect on the nightmare that unfolded with our entitled neighbors, I can't help but wonder how it all escalated so quickly. Little did we know, our peaceful new home would become a battleground of accusations and prejudices. Here's how it all went down. Here's a personal experience of mine that I think really encapsulates what it's like dealing with entitled neighbors. We had just settled into our new home, complete with a shared driveway, and little did we know, we were about to get a first-hand lesson in entitlement. Can you believe these people? I would often catch myself wondering. They had more than enough space to park their cars without causing any trouble, but they seemed to go out of their way to make our lives difficult. In the early days, we tried to keep things amicable. "Hey, would you mind moving your car a bit? We need to get out," I'd ask, plastering on a smile and hoping for a bit of neighborly cooperation. But as the months rolled by, our patience started to wear thin. We left notes, put up signs, and even got in touch with their landlord, all in a desperate bid to resolve the issue. We even went to the extent of widening our side of the driveway, but did that deter them? Not in the slightest. "They're acting like children," my husband would remark, shaking his head in disbelief. Instead of addressing the issue with us directly, they chose to play the victim, spreading rumors and painting us as the bad guys to anyone who would listen. We're not even blocking the driveway. They're just making a big deal out of nothing, they'd insist, conveniently ignoring the fact that their cars would be parked there for hours, sometimes even 3 cars deep. All we're asking for is a bit of common courtesy, I'd vent to my friends, feeling utterly frustrated. We always made sure to park on our side, giving them plenty of space, and yet they couldn't seem to reciprocate. The entitlement didn't end at the driveway, though. They had the nerve to come banging on our door, demanding we move a truck that wasn't ours, while they continued to block our driveway and hog all the parking space on our street. If you're going to block our driveway, at least leave us somewhere to park, I'd think to myself, trying to make sense of their logic. And the parenting, or lack thereof, was a whole other story. They're just letting their kids run wild, I'd observe, as their children treated our front yard like their personal playground. We'd come home to find kids leaning on our car, rocks thrown at our house, and trash scattered across our lawn. And when we tried to address the issue, we were met with silence and accusations of prejudice. I'm not trying to start a feud, I just want some peace and quiet, I'd tell my husband, feeling defeated. We endured loud late-night basketball games, constant noise, and a complete disregard for our property. And when we finally had enough and made a noise complaint, we were labeled as racists. I'm just trying to solve a problem, not create one, I'd insist, knowing that we had given them more than enough chances. We reported other neighbors for similar issues, regardless of their race, because at the end of the day, it's about respect and consideration, something our old neighbors seem to lack entirely. Now that they've finally moved out, I can't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Good riddance, I say, ready to put this chapter behind us and start anew. Establishing a positive relationship with neighbors is crucial, as it can contribute to a peaceful and harmonious living environment. While it can be unfortunate to encounter difficult and entitled neighbors, it is important to approach such situations with patience, open communication, and a sense of community. By fostering understanding and mutual respect, we can strive for better relationships with our neighbors in the future. I thought my sister's birthday party would be a fun night off for my wife and me, but when she handed me a piece of paper with Tiananmen Square 1,989 inches written on it and asked for a Mandarin translation, I knew something was off. As tensions rise and accusations of racism fly, I find myself questioning if I overreacted or if I made the right choice by walking out. Here's how it all went down. Alright, let me give you the full scoop on what went down at Annie's birthday party last night. So, Annie, that's my sister, just turned the big 4. My wife and we've been looking forward to this shindig for a while, especially since we managed to score some free babysitting from her parents. Our little dude is just 16 months old, so you can imagine. A night off is a big deal for us. The party was pretty chill, just a bunch of adults hanging out having a good time. Annie doesn't have kids, so it was a nice break from the usual kid-centric parties. Now here's where things get a bit interesting. I'm a white guy, and my entire family is white. My wife, however, she's Chinese. Born there, moved to the States with her family when she was 16, and she's been a citizen for years now. She speaks English like a pro, but her family, especially the older folks, they're all about Mandarin. So, me being the dedicated husband that I am, I've been trying to learn Mandarin for the past couple of years. It's a tough language, man, but I'm getting there. I can understand bits and pieces of conversations, and I can say simple stuff like, "Is the food hot?" or "Did the little guy get his diaper changed?" I've also been trying to get the hang of reading and writing in Mandarin. I'm focusing more on reading right now, seems to help me pick up the language better. I even throw in some cool sentences in our family chat on Facebook every now and then. Annie, she's not super active in the chat, but she does post these articles from Fox News, usually stuff that's pretty critical of China. I've never been able to figure out if she's got something against Chinese people or what. She's never said anything weird to my wife, at least not that I know of. So, diving back into the party scene, we were all just chilling around the dinner table sharing laughs and stories when Annie decides to pass me this small piece of paper. Curious, I unfold it and see Tiananmen Square 1989 written on it. I'm kinda taken aback and look up at Annie, who's just sitting there with this cheeky grin on her face. "Hey, think you can translate that into Mandarin for us?" she asks, trying to sound all nonchalant. I'm staring at her, my mind racing, and I'm like, "Annie, seriously, why would you even bring that up right now?" She just shrugs, still grinning. "What? It's just a translation. Thought you'd like to show off your Mandarin skills." I can feel my face getting hot, and I'm just like, "Annie, that's not cool. You know exactly why this is messed up." My parents are starting to look worried, and my dad's like, "Hey, let's all just calm down. It's a party." But I'm past calming down. I'm like, "No, Dad, this is not okay. She's being racist, and she's doing it on purpose." Annie rolls her eyes. "Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. It's just a joke." I'm just shaking my head. "A joke? Annie, this is my family you're making fun of, my wife, my kid. How is that a joke? The room's gone quiet, and everyone's just staring. My mom's trying to diffuse the situation. Let's not ruin the party over a misunderstanding, but I'm done. I'm like, misunderstanding? Mom, there's no misunderstanding here. Annie knew exactly what she was doing. I grab my coat, and I'm heading for the door. We're leaving. I can't believe you do this, Annie. My phone starts buzzing in my pocket. Texts from family and friends, telling me I'm overreacting, that I've ruined Annie's birthday. But in that moment, I'm just too mad to care. I needed to get out of there. I talked to my mom this morning, tried to explain why what Annie did was just not okay, how it was racist and targeted towards my family. I told her, if Annie's going to be around, I'm not coming over. Mom kinda just echoed Annie though, and now, with all these messages, I'm starting to second guess myself. Did I really overreact? My wife, she's been amazing through all of this. She gets why I'd be upset, but she wasn't really affected by it herself. So, yeah, that's the whole story. I just need to know, am I the jerk here? It may be helpful to have an open and honest conversation with your sister and gauge your wife's feelings about the situation. If your wife doesn't feel offended, it is possible that you may have overreacted. It's important to communicate and listen to each other's perspectives in order to find a resolution. Keep in mind that everyone's feelings and experiences are valid, so approaching the conversation with empathy and respect is crucial. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.